everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. You're going to like this. So, we're going to start today. Let me go ahead and minimize myself here. So we're changing gears from the Industrial Revolution. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. We're changing the gears from the Industrial Revolution to, we're going to be talking more about politics today. And the early 1800s, politics can get pretty crazy. All right. But before we get into some crazy stories with some very strong characters, we need to talk about something called the Monroe Doctrine. Now, the Monroe Doctrine just means you're saying something. The reason this is so important is by James Monroe, who was the president. He's the president during the War of 1812. Kind of ushers in the era of good feelings after we win that war. All right. So James Monroe issues the Monroe Doctrine. It's one of the few things he's known for. The reason the Monroe Doctrine is so famous is because it lasted a really long time. It's still up to present day. It's more complicated today, but up to present day, it still is a thing, and it's a pretty simple statement. All right. So what the Monroe Doctrine is, and I got a little cartoon here, and this is a good way of showing it. As America, so the Western Hemisphere is North America and South America. We just say ours, like you can't have it. All right. And this is supposed to be Europe over here that has the rest of the world, and they're like, don't come over here messing with America. That's not going to be a thing that happens. So it has a collection of things that America follows for a long time. All right. One of the things that America doesn't follow is actually the first point, is that the United States isn't going to get involved in foreign affairs. That we're just like, we're staying out of it. Y'all got your own dumb problems over there? Fine. Don't ask America for help. We'd already been having issues with, England and France, and they both think we should. We're just like, nah, we ain't getting involved in your problems, so don't ask us no more. All right. Second thing in the Monroe Doctrine is that if you already have a colony here, I'll give you an example that we'll talk about when we get to American II. Like Spain, they own an island called Cuba. All right. So this is the best map, but they own an island called Cuba over here. All right. I got another map here. This is that we will acknowledge their existing colonies. So like Cuba here, that we are going to say, yes, we acknowledge that you have a colony here. We ain't messing with it. So don't act like we're getting squirrely and we're like invading anything. We're not. However, you can't have any new colonies. So like Spain can't make an additional colony over here. What you have is what you keep. You're not getting anything else. All right. And here's the big one. America will defend any country over here that Europe comes over and messes with. So if Europe comes over here and tries to take over something in South America, we're going to come to the aid of South America. All right. So America, we are the protector of this hemisphere. Don't come over here. Don't mess with us. All right. We own all of this now. We're going to control it. The other countries that are over here, we are going to protect them. Now, that sounds an awful lot like we're being nice to these other countries. Not really. The other countries understand what's happening. So instead of like America taking up for them and being nice to them, the reason America doesn't want Europe involvement is because America plans on abusing South America. We're going to go down there. We're going to demand favorable trade agreements. We're going to buffalo them. We're going to bow up to them. Our military is more superior than anybody else in this hemisphere. So we don't want anybody over here getting help from anybody over here. That's why we bow up to Europe, is so that we can bow up to South America. All right. We don't want South America or these other weak developing countries getting any help from anybody else, so that we can be a bully to them. So the Monroe Doctrine basically tells the rest of the world, stay out of the Western Hemisphere. To present day, and JFK had talked about it with his Alliance for Progress, that the Monroe Doctrine says America is responsible for this hemisphere. While we still have some bully tendencies in this hemisphere, we've moved past most of that, and we do kind of attempt to be the big brother here in the Western Hemisphere. But the Monroe Doctrine is very important, because we let Europe know, if you try to come over here, we're going to fight you. All right. So the question here is, why did James Monroe want Europe to leave South America alone? So we just got done talking about that with the Monroe Doctrine. So explain here, like, what does America get? Like, what benefit does it give America? And so pause me if you need to, and we're going to move on. All right. Oh, man. So the election of 1824. All right. So in the election of 1824, all right, here's who's going to be running for president. All right. There's three guys. So the Federalists, they're done. They're not a thing anymore because they talk trash about America in the Hartford Convention in the War of 1812. So these are some different political parties. So here's who's running for president in 1824. John Quincy Adams. This is John Adams' son. John Quincy Adams. Now, John Quincy Adams is very similar to his dad. He is extremely smart, like incredibly intelligent, super smart, not the most personable person, like not the most likable individual on earth. So John Quincy Adams is an experienced politician, would make a pretty decent president. I mean, he'd get the job done, absolutely. So he's the son of John Adams, and John Adams is the second president of the United States. So John Quincy Adams, he's probably the purebred to come in here and be the president. The next guy is Henry Clay. Henry Clay is a very energetic guy. People like him. He is very good at coming up with these compromises. The ones that have already happened, ones that have previously happened, these big compromises, so much that his nickname is the Great Compromiser. So Henry Clay is called the Great Compromiser. He's good at working with people that disagree with each other to come up with a solution. So again, you know, he's not as popular as John Quincy Adams is, or maybe doesn't have the same pedigree that John Quincy Adams does, but probably wouldn't be an awful president. And then you got Andrew Jackson. All right. Now, I like to basically make Andrew Jackson a caricature because in my mind, that's what I imagine. So Andrew Jackson's from North Carolina. All right. And Andrew Jackson's a redneck. That's just the best way of explaining it. He's a country boy from the South. And I like to refer to Andrew Jackson as Andrew by God Jackson. All right. Because he's a military guy. He's not formally educated. I'll go fight anybody that needs to. When I talk about him like a caricature, let me put in context where it's only somewhat a caricature. When he eventually dies of old age, he is going to have in his body, for the rest of his life, 2 different bullets from 2 different duels that he won. 2 separate times in this man's life. He got in duels with pistols and got shot and then won. Meaning, I guess he killed the other guy and then just said, "I got a bullet in me." Good with it. And just lived with 2 separate bullets are lodged in this man's body for the rest of his life. For 2 separate occasions. It's absolutely insane to hear his... now, he also is a war hero. He could have got shot in the war. So I probably need to look that up before I tell you it was 2 separate duels. But I do know he did duel multiple times in his life. And he does have bullets inside him. So this man, he's a hardcore redneck. Now here's the thing. The voting public, the white males in America, they love themselves a redneck. That boy's a hardcore redneck just like me. They love Andrew Jackson, not just because he's a redneck, all right, because he's a war hero. This is the man at the Battle of New Orleans. Even though the war had already been over for 2 weeks in the War of 1812, he invaded New Orleans and captured New Orleans. In America's mind, we believe that after the Battle of New Orleans, England quit and went back home. Why? Because Andrew Jackson said so, all right? So Andrew Jackson is this war hero with no political experience at all that's going to run for president in 1824. So in the election of 1824, it gets really weird really quick, all right? So here's what happens. Let me show you a map here. In the election, there's no winner. So in the election, 41.3% of the people in America voted for Andrew Jackson. 30.9% voted for John Adams. So Andrew Jackson got more, considerably more than John Adams. Then you got, where's Henry Clay over here? Yeah, Henry Clay got 13% of the vote. All right. However, nobody had a majority. You're like, Andrew Jackson clearly has a majority here. He has the most. The most and the majority is not the same thing. Majority means over 50%. All right. So nobody here has over 50%. So what they do is they take the top 3 of these guys and they take them to the House of Representatives and they have them vote. All right. And in the House of Representatives, they're going to vote for who they want to be the next president. Well, when in the House of Representatives, Andrew Jackson gets about 41% of the vote. John Adams gets about 31% of the vote. But these are about the same in the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, since Henry Clay is the only other guy that's allowed to show up, all of these get combined together to give Henry Clay more votes. But it's still not, he's still clearly in third place. And they vote again, and they vote again, and they vote again, and they vote again. And so it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Because this is really, we're still a young country. Like, how are we going to survive this? So what ends up happening, and it's called the corrupt bargain, because it's never officially proven that this happened, but every human being on earth knows this happens, and this is a historical, I guess you can't say it's fact because they never admit to it, but 100%. So John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay aren't necessarily friends with each other. All of a sudden, what happens is Henry Clay comes out, who's in third place. He has no shot of winning here. Henry Clay comes out and says, hey, everybody that voted for me, y'all vote for John Adams now. And everybody's like, what? And John Adams is like, yes, vote for me. Like, this doesn't shock John Adams at all that he said this. So everybody doesn't vote for Henry Clay. They all vote for John Adams, giving him about 60% of the vote, who now has a majority in the House of Representatives and gets elected president. The very first thing that John Quincy Adams does as president is appoints Henry Clay as the Secretary of State, like the second most powerful position in America. It is obvious what has happened. Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams teamed up, realizing they can't actually beat Andrew Jackson. So they team up and they call it, eventually is referred to as the corrupt bargain. And they team up to get more votes than Andrew Jackson and allow, this is a picture of John Quincy Adams, to become the president in 1824. Absolutely makes everybody furious. They cannot, like the American people. Now, granted, only 40% of the people had voted for Andrew Jackson. But remember, this is still a time period where you weren't really supposed to campaign for the president. You're supposed to be kind of George Washington-esque and be like, I don't want it. If you make me do it, I'll do it. This is clearly wanting to be the president, and it looks like they stole the presidency because the guy that got only 30% of the vote is now the president over a guy that got a whole lot more of the vote. And John Quincy Adams, when he comes into office, is extremely disliked. Why? He stole the election. And that is the interpretation of John Quincy Adams, that he goes in and steals the presidency. Let me show you how much he was disliked. All right. So here's the questions. Election of 1828 is the next thing that we'll talk about. So let me go back. Election of 1824 was what we just talked about. Literally the next slide in American history is the election of 1828. You know why? You know how much stuff happened during John Quincy Adams' time in office? Nothing happened. You know why? Because nobody would let him. He was extremely disliked his entire term in office because, again, it looked like he stole the election. So what do? In response to this is they're just waiting for 4 years to get rid of him. Like he can't be like, he didn't break any laws. All right. It's just his character is absolutely damaged. Who does everybody love now? Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's hardcore redneck looks like, he's the underdog because, he grew up North Carolina. No, he's rich. Let's not pretend like he's not rich. He is. But he basically got, done in by the, the underbelly of DC politics. Everybody loves Andrew Jackson because now he's the underdog. Like, he had this stolen from him. So during John Quincy Adams' presidency, Andrew Jackson's support skyrockets. And John Quincy Adams, whatever he had, just disappears. So John Quincy Adams had a pretty miserable presidency, kind of like his dad did as well. In large part because of what's called the corrupt bargain, where they feel like he stole the election from Andrew Jackson. So that's the questions here. Even though Andrew Jackson got the most votes in 1824, why wasn't he elected president? And then, how did the corrupt bargain lead people to immediately dislike John Quincy Adams when he took over the presidency? And who did everybody like? So we've answered those in detail. So pause me if you need to and answer those, and we will move on. So the election of 1828. Man, it's a landslide. Oh, it's absolute landslide. I don't think anybody's really shocked by this. This is Andrew Jackson's going to win huge. I mean, it's how many states that you win. Look at all these states that Andrew Jackson wins. He destroys John Quincy Adams in the election of 1828. But the election itself is worth noting, the campaign leading up to it. These two men talked some crazy trash about each other, talking about people cheating on each other's wives and like, oh man, it got dirty in the 1800s. And really is the first, they say it's the modern, like where it's just like, all right, gloves are off. Really happened in the election of 1828. They were vicious with each other. But Andrew Jackson in 1828, he's going to win. All right. Now, I want you to imagine, play a little game at home here. Where we live out here in the country, we all know some hardcore rednecks. We all know. I want you in your mind to imagine, shut your eyes, and think about the most ridiculous redneck you've ever met in your life. The most stereotypical redneck you've ever met in your entire life. All right. Now, imagine that person just became the president of the United States. All right. And in class, typically when I get here, everybody's like, oh, like, that's pretty much what happened. So that person in your mind, most stereotypical redneck you've ever known, they become the president. What's the first thing that they're going to do? And you're like, well, and before you start talking about policies, how about just throw a huge party with all your friends to come over and have a huge party at the White House? Now, let's not make it sound too awful like having a party with all your friends at the White House. Andrew Jackson's the first guy that's going to do it. However, Andrew Jackson's friends are a whole lot different than like George Washington's friends, that are a whole lot different than, Thomas Jefferson's friends. This is a picture of Andrew Jackson. He's on the $20 bill. They have talked about changing him out for multiple different people, and we'll talk about why there is some controversy when we get to tomorrow's lesson surrounding him, and legitimate controversy. But the controversies today, or the trash talk I want to do, is pretty harmless. So he's going to have a huge party at the White House. All presidents did. So the problem is that the friends of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were like high-class friends. He just invites all his redneck friends. Like, woo, come on over. They literally had to, so there's a White House staff that works there, regardless of who the president is. They had to take, like, the kegs of beer and put them outside because people were acting so ridiculous inside, and people were climbing out the front windows of the president's mansion, of the White House, to get out to the beer that's in the front yard. They're like skeet shooting with the fine china in the backyard of the White House. Like, it is baffling because nobody like this is like one of the people, this is represents kind of the typical American upper class population, not the aristocrats that we've been having. Congress is shocked by this, and they're like, like this is absolutely awful. Like, what are we going to do? Because they're not used to having somebody like this in the White House. Somebody that really represents the people. He is loved by the American people. Absolutely. They're like, oh, he's redneck. He's just like me. So that he had tons of support, which is called a mandate. You have overwhelming support by the public. It's called a mandate. All right. So Andrew, by God, Jackson, he's the president. First thing he's got to do, he's got to like get all these people to help him run the government. This is something called patronage. All right. Also called the spoils system. As we progress through U.S. history, we will talk about this more in detail. Patronage is, it's like to the victor goes the spoils, all right? Like you win something, you get all the rewards. It's not a problem. George Washington became president. What was his reward? He can basically put whoever he wants to run the federal government. He's the head of the federal government. He can put anybody wherever he wants. It happens to Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, all these guys that, James Monroe. These guys come in and they put whoever they want in charge. It's never been an issue. You know why? Because the people they're putting in charge are very competent and they're their friends who are aristocrats as well. Andrew Jackson, however, he's like, hey, Billy, we went to preschool together. You remember that? I know you dropped out by first grade. I made it all the way to the second grade. You're now going to be in charge of something really important. All right. He's turned around and starts appointing all of his friends that are incredibly not competent for these jobs. Terrifies America. So when I say America, let me rephrase that. It terrifies Washington, D.C., all right, that he's doing this. So patronage had never really been an issue in the United States because the people who had been appointing their friends had been appointing really competent friends. Now all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, this idea of patronage or the spoil system, and I got this is a cartoon of him. I don't quite understand the riding the pig thing. I probably should. If I looked it up, it'd be pretty, make sense to me. But this is us drawing at the time of him riding a pig. It says, to the victor goes the spoils, or belongs the spoils. Andrew Jackson just appoints all of his friends to these high positions of power because he can. And it starts to become a question of, wait a minute, should we allow the president, like, for all these positions to have the ability to do that? Because what if we get, like, Andrew Jackson in there that appoints all these people that aren't competent enough to actually do these jobs? Now, one of the biggest things that these people are supposed to do for Andrew Jackson is help advise him and help him run the country, all right? However, typically when presidents just appoint all their friends to high positions of power, it works out really, really bad for them because their friends aren't always great at their jobs and can ruin a whole bunch of stuff. Andrew Jackson is kind of an anomaly in this situation. He appoints all his friends and it doesn't come back to bite him. The reason is because Andrew Jackson is extremely stubborn and doesn't listen to anybody for any reason at any time. He's going to do whatever crap he wants to do when he wants to do it because, by God, I'm Andrew, by God, Jackson. Do whatever I want. So he puts all these positions, people in positions, and they tell him what he should do, and he just ignores them. Says, I know you, Billy, whatever. I'm going to do whatever I want. So he doesn't actually listen to all these people, and it actually keeps from having catastrophic effects for some of the positions that he appoints. So, and I'll simplify this for you, tell you a little story on how this works. So, Andrew Jackson, the only ideas that Andrew Jackson comes up with are his own ideas, all right? And it's absolutely ridiculous how this works. But he's a man, and we as men, sometimes, and it is a shortcoming on our own, my wife has figured out that I am very stubborn. If it's not my idea, I'm resistant to it. It's a shortcoming in my personality, and I 100% admit it. Trying to work on it, but not very good success. So here's what my wife does. I'll give you an example. All right. She figured this out a couple years after we were married. So say it's like, it's Friday night. And she's like, hey, I want to go out to eat. All right. And then if she comes over to me and she's like, hey, Mr. Wagstaff, we'll just say she calls him Mr. Wagstaff. She's like, let's go out to eat. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go spend money. I don't want to get dressed up. I'm tired. I don't want to. And then we end up not going out to eat because I didn't want to. So what my wife has figured out, she's got to make it my idea to go out to eat. Now, my wife also knows that if she presents me with a problem, I don't have a lot of empathy. I want to fix it because I'm a fixer. She presents me a problem, I want to fix it. So she'll come to me and she'll be like, oh, I should just sit down next to me on the couch and be like, oh. My spidey sense goes off because there's a problem. And my natural reaction is, let me fix it. So I'm like, yeah, darling, what's the problem? She's like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm not going to be able to fix this. Again, spidey sense gets super strong. I'm like, ooh, let's solve this problem. And I'm like, all right, what is it? And she's like, oh, what if, I'd really like, I don't know, I'm hungry. I'd like to go spend some money. Might even want to get dressed up, but there's just no possible way we can do all of that at the same time, so I don't even know what to do. And I'm like, I got an idea, darling. We can solve all three of those. Let's go out to eat. And she's like, oh, great idea. I'm ready. Let's go. And she like walks out the door. I'm like, wait a minute. I've been bamboozled. So that typically is a male trait. It is not the greatest trait of the idea that it has to be our idea for it to be a good idea. Not that we're actually against the idea. Andrew Jackson is an extreme version of that. All right. So, and I would, again, super simplified version here. If Congress passes a law that says, while Andrew Jackson is president, like, you shouldn't set puppies on fire, or like, that should be against the law, and then make it a law, like, who's going to be against that? It gets to Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson looks at it and he's like, what? No, not setting puppies on fire. Who? Congress did it? What if it's a demon puppy? That's the only way you kill demon puppies. To set, like, he'll have some ridiculous, and he'll veto it. All right? Andrew Jackson vetoes more bills than the previous 7 presidents, or the previous 6 presidents combined. He's the 7th president. He vetoes, so he just vetoes it. It's like, oh, that's awful. He vetoes everything. But then, and Congress is like, I can't believe this dude's against having puppies set on fire. The next day, and I'm making this example up, but this is pretty much how he operated and how Congress viewed him. The next day, Andrew Jackson's sitting around, he's like, you know what's crazy? Is that people can just like set puppies on fire, and that's not against the law. We should have a law against that. I can't believe I have to think about everything in this whole country. Fine. So he sits down and scribbles out a law. Setting puppies on fire is illegal, and he gives it to Congress for them to pass it. Congress is like, are you serious? Like, just, you know what? Fine, whatever. And Congress will pass the law, and then he's like, see, I got to do everything around here. And Congress is like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, we gave him the same idea yesterday he vetoed, but he only accepts it once it's his idea. His stubbornness and the fact that he vetoes tons and tons of stuff gets him nicknamed by Congress King Andrew I, because they felt like he was just ruling like a dictator. If it wasn't his idea, it wasn't going to happen. The reason he's able to get away with this and do these things, and most presidents aren't, is because, again, he has a mandate, an overwhelming support by the American people. Tomorrow, well, let's answer this and I'll talk about it tomorrow. So why was patronage never a big deal? Like why was it never a problem, I should say, until Andrew Jackson? All right. And then the other one is why was Andrew Jackson referred to as King Andrew I? So pause me if you need to. Answer these in complete sentences. Tomorrow, we're going to talk more about Andrew Jackson. Really cool stories, but you also see more. So today is kind of like fun stuff with Andrew Jackson. There's some pretty messed up stuff. Andrew Jackson is enjoyable to teach about. That's for sure. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.